Hello, my name is Seungjun Ha, and today I'm going to presentate about my research of Korean Air 801 tragedy. Korean Air Flight 801 tragically crashed on August 6, 1997 while making its final approach to Antonio B. Wonpet International Airport in Guam. The Boeing 747 struck a hillside, resulting in the loss of 228 lives out of the 254 passengers and crew on board. The accident was attributed to a combination of adverse weather, pilot error, and inadequate air traffic control procedures. The National Transportation Safety Board reports highlighted pilot error as a significant contributing factor. For this research project, I will adopt the perspective of the captain of Flight 801, examining the situational factors presented in the NTSB report and FAA resources. The captain had an impressive total flight time of 8,932 hours, including 1,718 hours as a Boeing 737 captain. He also logged 2,884 hours as a military pilot and had been awarded a Safely Commendation in May 1997 for successfully managing an in-flight emergency. Just a month before the accident, he had flown to Seoul to Guam route, which likely gave him confidence for this flight. At the time, aviation regulations were still evolving and pilots typically familiarized themselves with destination using airline provided training videos. The Korean Air familiarization video for Guam emphasized that visual approaches were common year-round, even though instruments meteorological conditions could occur during the monsoon season. Given the captain's recent experience landing in Guam under visual flight rules, he likely expected a similar approach for this flight. As reported in the NTSB report, page 140, the most recent automatic terminal information services report available to the crew indicated scattered clouds with 7 miles of visibility, suggesting favorable conditions for a visual approach. At this point, his expectation for the VFR approach likely became too close to certainty. As indicated by this report from the FAA website, when Captain began briefing the crew, he set the frequencies for the instrument landing system and VOR, but he noted that the glide slope was out of service, which set the minimum descent altitude at 560 feet, which corresponds to 304 feet above the touchdown point. And he mentioned that since conditions were VFR, they could execute a visual approach if needed. The captain's briefing was relatively short, focusing mainly on visual approaches, with only brief mentions of backups for a localizer-only approach. Unfortunately, the rapidly changing weather, including heavy rain, was not reflected in the ATIS. After the air traffic controller cleared the flight to descend at their direction, and after the captain briefed the crew, according to the NTSB report, page 135, data from the cockpit voice recorder shows that the crew first spotted the island at 1:26 a.m., about 60 minutes before the crash. The flight engineer exclaimed it's Guam when they saw the island in the distance. Since while they were descending, they were available to visually contact the island, the flight crew might certain that VFR approach is possible. However, the weather was kept disorienting, and due to its elevated hilly terrain, the weather could change rapidly. As you see on this image, the Korean Air 801 crashed approximately 3 miles from the airport's runway. In the approach area, particularly around the Nimitz Hill, the weather condition was really bad, with the localized heavy rain, low clouds, and reduced visibility. As the aircraft descended into unexpected rain and clouds, the crew likely experienced spatial disorientation. They descended below the safe altitude without visual reference to the runway or vertical guidance from the ILS, realizing their low altitude only when it was too late. The first officer urged the captain to check altitude, but by the time the descent had reached a critical point, air traffic controller was unaware of the worsening rain, didn't provide guidance on the changing conditions, further complicating the crew's ability to visually acquire the runway. The captain likely believed that they would spot the runway visually once the plane descended through the clouds. These misjudgments and lack of responsibility ultimately led to the crash of the aircraft. Some may wonder why the crew didn't use onboard radar to track the weather. Although the NTSB report doesn't specify the reason, it's possible that the captain's overconfidence in the weather conditions led him to expect a straightforward VFR approach. Additionally, the CVR revealed signs of fatigue among the crew, which may have affected their decision making. According to the FAA website, the NTSB concluded that the probable cause of this controlled flight interterrian accident was the captain's failure to adequately brief and execute a non-precision approach, along with the failure of the first officer and flight engineer to properly monitor and cross-check the captain's actions. While the captain bears the ultimate responsibility, I want to emphasize that the unpredictable nature of the weather also played a role. This tragedy raises an important question. Would the accident have occurred if the weather had been as the 80s indicated? Although I cannot say for certain, more favorable weather conditions might have drastically changed the outcome. If the crew had maintained visual contact with the runway, the disaster could have been avoided. On the other hand, I can't help but feel a deep sense of regret, thinking that if the captain had checked the weather radar on board instead of relying solely on the ATIS, this tragedy might have been averted. Our discussion in week 3 focused on the importance of understanding weather and the various resources available to obtain weather information. Reflecting on this incident reinforces the significance of not only understanding the weather but also effectively utilizing various resources. This incident underscores the value of not just understanding weather but also effectively using all available resources. While no specific legislation followed this incident, the NTSB made recommendations to improve weather reporting requirements and ensure better dissemination of local weather information to pilots. The NTSB also required Korean Air to revise its Guam video presentation to emphasize the need to anticipate instrument approaches and provide more detailed information on approach complexity and terrain. I strongly agree with the NTSB's requirement for Korean Air because nowadays, even though thanks to the development of technique, we can get pretty much precise weather condition, but still, weather is inherently unpredictable and it is very important for pilots to remain vigilant considering all possibilities. Expanding the NTSB's recommendation, I would like to suggest 2 more real-life recommendations. My first recommendation is pre-flight briefing. Before every flight, we have to be ready and plan for the flight. While planning the flight, we have to check the weather, and we have to plan for the expected weather condition, and also we have to plan for the unexpected condition and be ready for that as well. And for the briefing, we always have to brief fully with other pilots if on board. My second recommendation is utilizing onboard radar system. This is something the Korean Air 801 crew did not do, but if they had, the accident would not have happened. For the onboard radar system, it could be a onboard weather radar or flight information service broadcast which use the ADS-B system, or it can be a contacting the flight station, or it can be also a phone weather application. The lessons learned from Korean Air Flight 801 tragedy highlights the ongoing need for pilot education and proactive aeronautical decision making in aviation. While pilots can anticipate and make predictions about weather condition, those predictions should never be taken as certainties. I believe that by fostering a culture of safety and humility, pilots can mitigate hazards, better navigate and manage unpredictable situations, and help prevent similar accidents in the future. Thank you for listening. This is the reference page for my research presentation. I used NTSB reports and FAA websites as my primary sources. On this reference page, I cited all the images that I used from first slide to the 10th slide. Next reference page, I cited all the images that I used from slide 11 to slide 19. Thank you again for listening my presentation.